Hello, Internet. My name is Colin Goldberg, and welcome to the 83rd Techspressionist Salon. Today is Thursday, June 6, 2024, and we have a wide variety of artists from all over the world here on Zoom. Today's topic is influences. So we have a couple people lined up to get us started talking about their artistic influences. And I would encourage anyone else who's in the Zoom to, share on pretty much anything that you want regarding current work or anything else. So influences is really just a jumping off point, and it doesn't need to focus necessarily on influences, and certainly does not need to be anything that has been prepared in advance. We started out with just a handful of people a number of years ago, and everything was pretty much off the cuff. And I think that keeps it fresh. So we can start off with, and when you share, maybe just introduce yourself and let the audience know and everyone else in the Zoom know where you're zooming in from, because I think it helps to establish context. So with that being said, the first artist that's going to share is Susan DeTroy.
Good morning. I come to you from Eugene, Oregon, where it's sunny. You can see the sun's coming through the window. We're having lovely weather here. So I jumped in because I love to share my work, and I'm going to share a video that I've been producing, and I would say that my influences are multiple. Particularly, I'm influenced by the natural world. I do a lot of my work that's video is rooted in the natural world, roses and plants and forest. And also I bike a lot. I bicycle a lot, and I've made a couple, maybe 3 movies. A newest one that's actually going to show tonight at a bike shop. And I would say also, since the co-working group has started, and I'm going to say this, my work has been influenced and supported by the co-working group on Tuesday mornings. I feel like that has been, and I was saying this last night to somebody I was trying to get to come to the co-working group, has been very influential and supportive. And I say, join us. Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen. And as I said, I didn't do a lot of prep, because I just said, okay, I'll do this. All right, optimize for video. All right. So I use CapCut primarily, probably that's the right now. And I learned CapCut during the pandemic. So an influence for me was the fact that it was a pandemic, and I took classes online on Zoom from an organization that's not really doing that anymore. And this was okay. Let's see if it'll come up. This is the film that's going to show tonight at the bike shop that I completed in April. Okay, so also, Colin, let me know. I don't know if we're doing a timing thing today, but I also want to share a couple other short films that I've been working on. Let's see, which one do I want to do? Oh, I another big influence for me is the Natural World, and this is an in-process film that I just submitted for a possible show in my city, or to be shown in Eugene in the fall. And it's I'm not going to show the whole thing because it's about 4 minutes, but okay, I'm gonna stop that there and go back to and this is an another influence that was pretty big for me was when I took the group class about I can't remember what it was called the last couple of years ago, and I based a lot of my work on roses. I did a lot of visiting the rose garden, and this is another film that is in process that, again, a lot of influence from the salon. I have many suggestions and that I integrated into my work. So this is the film, and it's about 2 minutes. Okay. There you go. Oops. It doesn't, things are happening. So those are my latest projects, and you know, I'm influenced by my whole lifetime of making art, but I'm primarily influenced by photography because that's how I entered in a really strong way. That's how I entered into the world of art and identified as an artist, identified myself as an artist when I was a photographer first. And I have all that history of going to school in photography and also um, just the black and white work. I mean, that, and so my history informs what I make now. And I was heavily influenced by being in a pandemic and trying to figure out how to make art at the same time and what was available to me at that time. So that's still influencing me because I started biking and going to the Rose Garden as ways to cope with being in a pandemic and isolated. And then I reached out and I found this salon, started coming to the salon. So that I would say all of that is influencing me when I'm working. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Susan.
Sure.
And before we move on, I just wanted to say that my colleague from graduate school, Patrick Lichty, was signed on to moderate this salon, and he's actually not here because a friend passed away who's a pretty important artist, I would say, or quite an important artist in the context of this group, particularly by the name of Roman Verostko. And I just wanted to share my screen really quickly and just pull up something a little bit about him. So if any of you guys are interested in looking him up, I would encourage you to do so. I had the pleasure of corresponding with him a little bit since this group started. And, he's somebody that I would certainly count among my influences. I was a little bit starstruck, to be honest, that, we had been communicating and did a couple Zoom calls, and he's now actually included in the Techspressionist Visual Artist Index. At first, he was a little bit hesitant to be added to it because he said, he identifies as an algorist, which is, I would say probably, one of the, if not the first actual computer art movements, and has been involved, he's been involved in algorithmic art for, or he had, he's a pioneer basically. Him, Vera Molnar, Chuck Suri, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but these are some of Roman's pieces. And he actually, to me, has a direct lineage to Techspressionism, even though he himself didn't identify that way. He lived in New York City during the time of the abstract expressionists in the 1950s, spent time with a lot of them downtown. Actually, I'm just looking at some of the emails that he had sent me. But he said that he had met quite a few of the American abstract expressionists while he lived down there. At a later time, he says, Techspressionism awakens memories of abstract expressionism, a title that many critics questioned in the 1960s, and I forget the alternative suggestions. At a later time, I'd like to share something about my experience with the abstract expressionists I knew in New York in the late 1950s and 60s. I did attend meetings of the club in the village that was organized by Philip Pavia, who is editor of the It Is journal, which is quite a famous journal. That led me to understand the brushstroke. Club consisted of active artists, many lived in or near the village, and I met quite a few. Ad Reinhardt, Motherwell, Philip Guston, George come to mind, et cetera, et cetera. So, I feel like Roman in particular is relevant to what this group is doing in terms of his direct involvement with American abstract expressionism and his interest in technology, which you can see these plotter drawings of his on the screen that, he actually inspired me. He was one of the artists, probably I would say the artist that inspired me to get a plotter. And I think it's extremely interesting what he was doing with the plotter is that, he didn't just use the standard pen plotting pens. He actually mounted calligraphic brushes in the plotter arm, and use that to create a lot of his work. He also wrote the code that generated all of these images, and you can see definitely an Asian influence in the work. So I just wanted to share a little bit about this guy. You should definitely look him up if you have not become familiar with his work, because I think he's certainly one of the most, I would say, important computer artists that has come our way so far. So yeah, that's it. I just wanted to give him sort of some props, because if it wasn't for people like Roman, I don't know that many people would have moved in that direction. I know a bunch of the people in this Zoom, or at least a couple. I know Cynthia, I believe, and Nina might have known him personally to some degree. So yeah, at any rate, I guess I will. I said I wasn't going to share, but these, I would say, I hadn't really thought about him being an influence until actually his passing, and he was 94. And the last time I spoke with him, he was extremely lucid, and still continuing to make work. This is, a couple months ago, and very inspiring, individual, and quite an interesting story personally. He was Benedictine monk for a good while, I believe, and had multitude of different lives. So I'd encourage you to look him up. Very interesting individual. So, all right. So the next artist that is up is Stephen Paré.
I have a
Thank you,
quick
Colin.
question.
Oh,
I have a quick question. Should we answer questions at the end that people have asked?
Yeah, I think that
Okay.
maybe we'll round it up at the end, because I think
Okay.
a lot of times, there's some crossover or synergy between what people share, and it just makes for a more interesting conversation. So, yeah. So, and you know what, like 12:25. So we usually go, or we basically go from 12 to 1:30. So maybe like around 1:15 or something, if it starts to if the pool of people that want to present individually starts to dwindle, then we can kind of open it up for general conversation. That seems like a good way to go. So Stephen, you have the mic.
thank you, Colin. It always seems like such a miracle. Anyway, what I want to share about today is it's actually work that I did in 2020. And the significance of that date won't be lost on Americans who have been paying attention to our current social situation and our political season. In a way, it comes as a surprise to me. I've always responded to things that were going on in my life, but I've always felt that the art part of art is not social commentary or advocacy or anything like that. I was doing revisions for my website, and I have a folder or a gallery for 2020. And so in sort of looking at that, I was in a way surprised by how much sort of social and political material there is, and how much sort of passion I've got about it. Okay, so I'm going to show 5 pictures. This one is entitled A Protest in a Forest. And for me, there's a sort of a delicious irony, but it's also sort of an occasion for me for sort of a oh God, is revenge the word? I mean, the idea of holding a vigorous, dynamic, vivid protest in the middle of nowhere where it can be completely ineffective was a sort of a revenge, I suppose, about the events of 2020 turned into 2021 as well. I guess I could say something about depicting something that I object to in a beautiful way, but I'm not sure what I have to say about that. It's just my inclination, and I'm not sure what beauty is anyway. So the second picture, I think I'm not quite getting the edges here. So it's a 16:9 kind of cinematic sort of presentation, and it's entitled "A Man with No Name Sings a National Anthem." And I'm was again sort of in reviewing this, surprised by my anger, frankly. And can you see the whole picture here? I'm seeing all sorts of, yeah, okay. Yeah, it's important to see the top because that's where the eyes are. So, and this has had several titles, but it's something like an angry Karen or a Karen shouting or something like that. So that whole phenomenon, I've got a close friend from Kenya. He referred to Karens as people who call the cops when they see black people walking around, which I think is a pretty good definition. Captured from some video, very low res, and I didn't up-res it very much. That's part of the idea. It's entitled Collabo, as in short for collaboration. There's kind of a French World War II reference or something like that. But anyway, the idea that there's a guy in an office somewhere on the right side, and his contact who's going out and creating some kind of mischief. And finally, I did a great many pictures of MAGA crowds, and sort of trying to get to the heart of it, trying to figure out about that, and taking a good look at who those people are. And I mean, if you look closely, you can see some Karens in there, and there's some, I'm afraid I sort of made some of them a little more horrible and that sort of thing. Again, I'm surprised by my reaction. I'm surprised by how vehement, my reaction has been. And, I do think of myself as somebody who's creating beautiful things for people's delight. And so I guess just lastly to say that as an artist, it's a sort of strange sort of delight to allow myself to be influenced by what's going on around me. So I suppose that's somehow the connection between a picture like this and let's call it art for art's sake. Anyway, if I can figure out how to stop share. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I did want to note that we have at least one actual Karen, an artist named Karen, in the lineup. So I just wanted to say that, you know, that is actually the name of individuals also, not necessarily a, you know, an internet meme. Actually, my prom date was named Karen, and she's about as far from a Karen as you could possibly imagine, the stereotypical term. So I just wanted to put that out there. I know
Thanks
you
for
weren't,
clarifying that. I'll just, if I could just add really quickly, I'm going to grab the mic for just a moment more. I remember, so you know, I was named Stephen. I was always called Steve when I was growing up. And that was a name in my generation for like an average guy. And there were a lot of people named that. And I remember seeing a Betty Boop cartoon where she's talking about her Steve. In other words, her, you know, probably, you know, a soldier or something like that. So there was, if Karen denotes something, Steve, I think, denotes a very average person.
Right on. Well, you know, every name or word has its own individual personal connotations. I just wanted to add a little footnote there, so you know, no feathers are ruffled out there in, in the ether, or you know, what have you. So, all right. Let me just see. Two is up next. Verneda.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm broadcasting to you from Port Royal, South Carolina, which is the heart of the Gullah Geechee Nation. I am going to share with you today a collection that I created on behalf of my graduating class from Bryn Mawr College. We graduated in 1974, so that's, 50 years ago. So we're having our 50th reunion, which was this past weekend. And I was a member of the fundraising committee for my class. And we set the goal, the lofty goal of raising $278,000. And I set about crafting a marketing program that would help us succeed in obtaining that goal. And indeed, we did reach the goal. And so I'm going to share the images that I created that I called the Sunflower Symphony, which became the portfolio from which I launched the social media campaigns for the college. I also did covers for our class booklet and whatnot, and it has since branched off into a online store where class members and other members of Bryn Mawr can buy memorabilia, which allows them to express how they feel about Bryn Mawr. So I'm going to share that with you now, parts of the Sunflower Symphony. Okay, can everybody see it?
Yep.
Okay. All right, I'm sharing from my Dropbox folder because, that's the most convenient way for me to pull up the images. And here we have Cat on a Windowsill is the title of this. And all of these images were created in collaboration with AI software, Midjourney. So have to give credit, for that. And my point here was to create a stained glass rendering of a cat asleep on the windowsill. And I never saw any cats on campus, but in meditating about what to create, I came up with this cat image and decided to convey it to the AI. And then later on in our discussions, I found out one of our committee members had not only had a cat, but but was aware of a community of cat lovers that secretly kept their beloved pet in their dorm rooms, and they often slept on the windowsills there. Okay, and this is a different cat on the windowsill. I think a more cuddly version of it. And here we see also the sunflowers are figured prominently, and the sunflower was the flower that I chose as a central symbol for the campaign. And I chose the sunflower because it turns towards the sun. And I saw that as a metaphor representing how women who lead nations and cultures forward seek enlightenment and knowledge and justice in the culture. So the sunflower, I thought, was an apt image, and it also at times was used to symbolize the suffrage movement. And also, Bryn Mawr being an all-girls college, I felt like, it was appropriate. It's one of the seven sisters. And this is the energy owl, which is, the fierce activist sort of component of my class, because there are many members of my class who went on to craft careers in pertaining to social justice. And I was surprised, to find out how many pathways had delved into that area. And I think it was because, well, maybe we were influenced by the era in which we grew up during the 60s, when there was lots of protests going on, and the civil rights movement, and also the launch of the women's movement. And this is another rendering of the colorful owl. And this image will be used to adorn a notebook that will be sold in the store, in our online store. And this is a version of it that is specifically branded for the reunion. And this is a image that I'm very fond of. At Bryn Mawr, we had this area of one of the original libraries that is a cloisters. And the cloisters is a very quiet, sort of a peaceful environment. And we often had special events there. And here I depict a diverse group of women in peace, enjoying tea in the cloisters. And the move towards diversity for Bryn Mawr, as other colleges, has been very fraught. And when I was there, I lived in the Black Cultural Center called Paré House, which no longer exists. It was torn down and is now a garden. So this watercolor painting is a way of conveying Bryn Mawr's journey and history of diversity. This also shows somewhat of the diverse elements, and also the images of older women. I was tempted to make all of the female representations within the campaign sort of quasi-youthful. And also in dealing with the AI, it was very challenging to get the image that I wanted for our ages. I mean, we're in our 70s now, but we still are ourselves. You know, we look like how we did. We're recognizable as the souls that we knew 50 years ago. But I wanted to exhibit the camaraderie of the women in our class. And I think this achieved it, although it took me a long time working with the AI in order to be able to get the gray hair and the level of wrinkles that I wanted. That's not it. Let's go on. Okay, this one is called Golden Owl, and it's a riff on the Golden Girls, you know, the TV show, to signify and do a nod to where we are now in life, being in the last quarter century of our existence here on the planet. And so you see the sunflowers also present there. The owl is a major symbol for Bryn Mawr. It's almost like a mascot, and it's much beloved. So I wove the owl into many of the pieces along with the sunflower. Okay, the same thing here. And this is the night owl. I was pre-med at Bryn Mawr. I majored in history, but I was also pre-med and afterwards attended medical school at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, now known as the Perelman School of Medicine. And the science classes at Bryn Mawr were very demanding, and I concentrated them all in my first 2 years so I would complete my med school requirements by the time I finished my sophomore year. And then in my junior and senior years, I focused on my history major that specialized in folk historical analysis. So I spent many nights studying and, you know, drinking coffee, and became a coffee lover as a consequence. And here you see the owl looks like they just had a shot of caffeine. You know, they look like their eyes are like, woo, you know, and the sunflowers even look like they're hyped. So that would be me after a night of hard studying, ready to head up to the science lab and take organic chemistry or other science finals or midterms. And I varied the branding at the bottom for, you know, for social media so that more than one person could use the image here. And this is it, you know, without anything attached to it, you know, just the image itself. And it is actually being auctioned to the class. The class, once they saw the artwork, they were so excited. They asked me to hold a silent auction, which we did do on the 28th of May. And I was so exhausted by the time we held the auction, you know, and it's still online and will continue until June 11th. More the same, more the same. Here we also have another variation of the golden owl. And this one's entitled Sisters, because there are many fond memories that the women have with the friends that were made during our college years. My best friend, unfortunately, did not survive to this reunion. She died in 2016. So this is more of the sunflowers. More sunflowers. And more sunflowers for the class of 1974. So that's me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Verneda. Really interesting.
Yeah, by the way, we raised, and I mentioned that we met our goal, we raised over our goal. So we're approaching close to $300,000 that was raised in that campaign. Isn't that cool? Yay!
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And I used an AI infused campaign to accomplish it. I did so because my point was this. We were born smack in the middle of the 20th century, okay, and came up during turbulent times here in the United States. But here we are in the 21st century, and I wanted to leave a solid stamp that my class, we are lifelong learners. And although we were born in the 20th century, which I think is fabulous, it was a great time for me to be alive. But we're very much determined to be within, live within, and influence what's going on here and now in the 21st century. And I wanted to do it in a way in which historians of the future could look back at our class and see if they saw nothing but our 50th reunion, they would be able to tell or discern core truths about who we are as women in America at this point in time. So thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you, Verneda. Really beautiful work and an interesting application of AI. I also appreciate the context in which, you know, the work is being used in a way that is, you know, commerce related, supporting your alma mater, you know, it just, it puts another perspective on how we as artists can, you know, utilize our craft. So thank you for that. So it looks like we have 2 artists left, and I think after Karen and Roz, we're going to close out the individual presentations. So we'll have some time for just open conversation. So Karen, you are up next.
Let me get my sound on here. And I think I've shown you this before, but I've shown so many, I can't remember. Oh, great. Seriously, Zoom, get out of the way. I need that button. There. Can you see the book with a solid gray background? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is a project that I've been doing for since the beginning of the pandemic, and in all honesty, I'm still sheltering in place. For all us people who have medical conditions that still make us very vulnerable to viruses that are out there. So here I am in my little spot. I'm actually from Cape Cod, Massachusetts on the island, and I have a little 2 or 3 room condo, and 4 years is a long time to stay. 2 or 3 room condo. So you have to find ways to engage with the world. And so I started this project at the beginning of the pandemic, sort of started from the influence that I have from the ocean, because if I had to pick one core thing, it would be the ocean. Because when I was a child from 8 to 13 years old, I was just given a boat, shown the ocean and said, go at it, kid. Just be back by 6. So pretty much the ocean was my teacher, and I learned that inside of a tidal pool, there was life. Underneath a rock inside of a tidal pool, there was a different universe of life. If you flicked over the sand, underneath that layer of sand, there was another, and it just kept going. So I have this sense of observation that I bring to my artwork. So during the pandemic, I said, okay, how do I do this? So I started taking 4 photos a day. And that's it. It's just it's like a meditation of just observation for observation's sake. It doesn't matter where you are. And I was amazed at the beautiful art forms that I could find, you know, in a crumpled up piece of paper or standing in a parking lot. So there's a little bit more detail so you can see some of the individual photos that I'm taking. And then what I did is, and I've done this now for almost 4 years, is I create these books annually. And this is the first one that I did. And I create these artworks out of the photographs that I take. My son showed me when I got my new Apple phone that, you know, forget the zoom, just take the phone and bring it right down to an inch from the wall or whatever you're trying to photograph, and it'll jump into crystal clear focus. So I started taking these super detailed shots. And they can be, there's a water bucket, a pathway lamp, some leaves, you know, a doily, an air conditioner, whatever I run into. And I find doing this once a day is sort of like a moment to stop and just look at the world for a moment, just for the sake of looking at it. Otherwise, we pass so much by. So it's like a drink coaster. I don't know if you can read any of these. Moss on a stone or water bubble. Toothbrush holder, house shingles. It goes on and on. So I end up doing, you know, maybe about 20 of these in a year from all the thousands of photos that I take. This is actually my stovetop, inspired this one. This is standing in a hospital parking lot. And I had this great crosswalk that was just a mess, and I was standing there trying to cross the street. And I said, wait a minute, get out the iPhone. Beach walks. This is just a study in glass. Feathers and other sundries. In fact, I think some of those are computer vents and stuff like that, the holes. And then my Galileo series. It's a cardboard box, a ceramic mirror frame, you know, vintage netting. There's a vegetable steamer. And I'll end with this, the fact that now, if you've seen this before, I know I've shown bits and pieces of it, but I'm not sure I've shown the whole book, but it's now up online on Kunstmatrix as an exhibit. So I'll put in the URL in the chat so you can go there and have fun. Anyways, that's what I am sharing today, so I will stop. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing, Karen. Okay, and actually I had one more artist message me asking if he could present briefly. So after Roz, we have one more, Michael Woodruff, and make a hard cutoff after Michael. So we'll have some time. So Roz, take it away.
Sorry, I was muted. Can everybody see my screen of John Berger, I think it is.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go back in time a little bit here, I'll try to make this sort of quick, but you may remember John Berger. He wrote Ways of Seeing, and it's a book I certainly appreciate, as it's all about how we see women through the lens of male painters over the years, and he talks about all that. Something is covering my screen. I don't know, leave meeting. I don't know. I have something on my screen that is preventing me from, oh, here we go. Okay. So I'm going back in time a little bit. He asked us to look at works like, you know, the Venus of Urbino, the woman lounging, the classic Odalisque sort of version of, you know, the male view of the beautiful woman. Going fast, just put this together quickly. Eugene Delacroix's Odalisque reclining on a divan. Beautiful paintings. But this continually turned around in art, and I'm bringing it one step further. Here we have Manet's Olympia, where we really have a different point of view of the woman, and she's looking right out and saying, hey, you know, she's not sitting back passively with the regard just being the male. She's looking right back out with her own sort of stature. And I'm going to just go forward to a piece that I did in 95. As a lot of you know, I've been in this field a long time, when since my painting still with pixels in New York in the 80s. This is my version of the Odalisque, and it stars my husband, James Dawson. I have the toolbox around me. This was actually done in 1990, and I fabricated it out to a huge chrome that's about 60 inches wide and 48 inches high. And it's got a kind of funny story with it. I put all the toolbox around it because that was my new language I was so excited about. I don't remember if we had 88 colors on a Amiga or quite what computer I had at this point. But I did take a video camera out and took a picture of James. James and I both were working in like kind of the heart of capitalism in digital media. I was either heading up new media for Deloitte at the World Trade Center or at the Wall Street Journal doing creative storytelling around, no, it wasn't this time, it was earlier. But yeah, I think I was making animations for Estee Lauder and doing my own work on the side in the 90s, showing fine art and running my own company, but we were doing well. And we're in our Soho apartment. My husband undresses, I photograph him and place the cat just so, putting the toolbox around this and working in Photoshop to make this piece. And I always loved pixels, so they're pretty evident down here. This is one of my still images. I'm not even nearly at the place where, you know, after 9/11, where I started making paintings that you actually go inside the layers, my diamondscapes. But it's still always, and has been for me, about the final image. And this image actually hung in our Soho apartment at 6th and Prince Street. And the tour buses, and it was backlit. It was fabricated out to a chrome, backlit by light and a light box. And the tour buses in New York actually started stopping at this point as they came back up 6th Avenue. And so James really had his time in the sun, you know. But it's sort of like the woman is, the guy is home kind of hanging out and the woman's bringing home the bacon idea. So we've taken the whole woman to a whole nother place. And as a feminist and someone who's always argued strongly for women's rights and feeling so strongly about what's going on now, I thought telling the influence of John Berger, appreciating men too, who see these things, and regarding the past with respect, but bringing us up into the future. And a quick just anecdote at the end. It was an early digital show in Soho of all digital paintings. And my dealer called me and said, Roz, you want the good news or the bad news? And I was showing the Odalisque, among other things. And it'd been quite a kind of glitzy, kind of exciting show. And he said, well, I said, well, just give me the good news. He said, well, we know that James is the modern Odalisque, which is the name of the piece. And I said, yes. He said, but the bad news is you've been sued by a New York model who says he's the Odalisque. Now, this gets to a lot of things because this guy, good thing I kept all my recordings and everything. I recorded James getting out of his business clothes and getting nude and placing him right on our kind of sofa couch and putting the cat just so and arranging him. And we went up to this kind of like shyster lawyer's office with our video and showed this to this person who was suing us for like, I don't know, thousands of dollars. And I think James's head was kind of swollen because he liked being confused for a New York model. But the whole thing kind of had a funny after effect. And of course, we won the case. I mean, it was just kind of an embarrassing situation all around, where we came back down the elevator and the guy who was the model was in the elevator with us after this whole embarrassing thing. And James looks at it. James is always like this. He goes, he says, hi, how you doing? And how's it going? And the guy looks at him and says, I've been told by my lawyer not to speak with you. So we're like, well, I bet. Anyway, so that's the end of this one. Thank you for listening. It was a kind of a fun, influential thing about well, all of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Ross. I was not familiar with that particular piece, but I have met James a number of times, so now it puts him in a little bit of a different light there.
Yes.
All right, so we have one more artist presenting, and that would be Michael Woodruff. So take it away, Michael.
Hi, Colin. Thanks. Yeah, I hadn't planned to present, but I know you'd mentioned the abstract expressionists, and that was like one of my first, when I sort of think I can do what I do and be an artist. That was like one of
Do you
my
mind just letting everyone know where you're zooming in from, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I'm in London, in the UK, so I'm just going to share my screen. So I hope you can see my screen. But anyone, you know, I've been doing the Tuesday salons, which have been great, and obviously can see my work, and I work in these animated kind of things, taking a lot of the abstract expressionists and lots of different influences from lots of different things I've done in my career. So I just wanted to show through, and I've taken a lot of archive and a lot of the ideas from a lot of the early art movements. So if I just go through, and you know, as you mentioned, the abstract expressionists, I always thought it'd be great to bring you know, a kind of motion. There's so much energy in those paintings and so many layers and understanding and stories behind it. You know, being static, I always thought it'd be great to try and bring, you know, those gestural marks, the animation, the colors, you know, and play with it, you know, have fun. So I think one of my first one was the irascible 18 who wrote the open letter to the Met because they weren't allowed to show. So a lot of their movement was based on this idea that they weren't really happy with what they saw in the art world, and they weren't getting the recognition, and they just wanted to show their work. And I sort of identified with that because I've been seeing a lot of generative artwork and digital artwork, and it's nothing new. It leaves me very cold. People aren't really exploring, for me, in the kind of artistic sense. They're just doing things just to fill screens and various devices and chasing economies and cryptocurrencies. So, you know, I always look back and just think, you know, the action paintings of Jackson Pollock, just all the energy with that, and obviously the Rothko, the colors, the kind of, you know, what these images, sort of the immersiveness of these images. And, you know, I played with them and adding them all together and trying to create animated collages. But I'm always going back to exploring some of these artists. Some I know a lot, some like Hans Hofmann I don't really know much about. But having a look at the, you know, the gestural marks and going in really close and having a look at the paint and how the colors and the splotches, you know, and decompressing them and then trying to bring them to life. You know, so that's an ongoing series that I've been sort of going back and forth on. But then when we talked about inspiration, I started with a mentor and said, oh, put, you know, some artists you like together. And, you know, there's lots of artists since I've sort of followed and kind of thing, but there's lots of various in my professional career that I've done. So I just wanted to quickly go through so many things here, but a lot of my influences are things like the graffiti artists who share a lot of, I think, similarities with the abstract expressionists, all these kind of mark makings, flows, you know, the ink, the process, you know, you can see how the time taken to make a lot of these images they create. There's just a few here. But for me, these were like one of the art school, seeing these graffiti artists, you know, they could use any canvas and throw their ideas up. It wasn't just limited to the art studio. So they were really inspiring. And obviously, because I work a lot in video, you know, seeing when I first moved to London, Bill Viola had a great retrospective. So obviously his work's been very influential, and people like Richard Moss and Marco Brambilla, who I've seen his work, and Carl Aganis, you know, they're playing with the video format and using lots of techniques, which is very influential. And also the first thing I started on was really photography, and obviously people like Ansel Adams, Dean Belcher, who works quite a lot in club culture, and obviously Gregory Crewdson and Jeff Wall, who I saw retrospectives of as well in London. And, you know, they're massive cinematic kind of images, and it opened my eyes up to really what art really was. Also, as well, that feeds into what I sort of do because of being graphic designer as well, of like design studios. There's two really influential ones from London, Tomato and the Designers Republic, who were then, they were inspired by like Cubism and Soviet graphics, like the Designers Republic, and Tomato with more the abstract expressionists. And you can see a lot, you know, just looking through some of these images here, you can probably tell some of the, you know, the influences, but they were very, you know, they weren't political, but they're all very political and, you know, working in the public sphere. So they were a massive influence on me when I was learning. But like modern artists as well, like people like Daniel Richter, who creates these, I can't really describe them in words. They're very visually over the top, kind of very in your face pictures, but you hark back to those abstract expressionists and graffiti making. And, you know, I find these very, very influential in the work I do. And it's just a few more there. And there's Matt the Sore, and so I'm near the end here. And finally, I think something is like the collage artists. So there's a great book I got recently, and, you know, it's just a, you know, it's very abstract, very graphic, and, you know, it's playing with all these textures and images, all found and archived. You know, I find all that very, very interesting. And so, and I can't forget all the old school artists who have influenced me, people like David Hockney, William Kentridge, who used animation, and he's probably one of the only, you know, I always think animation for me is such an overlooked, and, you know, I hardly see it in any gallery. And Edward Palazzo, John Cecil Stevenson, an abstract expressionist in Hampstead in London, Jerry Bywaters, on some of my American trips I found. And finally, someone who shares my namesake, Hale Woodruff, who I wasn't really aware of. I came across in a gallery, one of his woodcuts. And then he had such an extraordinary career, and obviously in activism and working in frescoes. And he worked with, I think it's Garcia in Mexico as well. And he taught in the schools, and he created these abstract expressionist paintings and landscapes, and, you know, a very diverse career. So yeah, that's my inspirations. I'll stop sharing.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Very diverse and interesting set of influences. You know, what you shared actually made me think about just one other quick person that I want to give a shout out to that's related to Techspressionism, I would say somewhat directly. And that is a painter by the name of Angelo Ipplolito, who is actually my undergraduate painting professor at Bennington University. And he was second generation abstract expressionist, lived and worked in downtown New York after coming to America from Italy. And he was the first abstract painter that I'd ever met. Before I had met him, I was working in sort of the fashion that was inspired by surrealist painters like Magritte and de Chirico, people like that. And he kind of opened my eyes to abstraction. And, you know, the students would ask him what his work is about. There were a couple things I remember about him vividly. And, you know, him being an abstract expressionist himself, I think definitely led me towards this idea of Techspressionism as a term, because I identified with what he was doing, specifically that he, you know, when people asked him what is his work about, he had a really interesting response. He said, it's about paint. And he didn't have anything further to say about it. The idea that the viewer completes the painting is something that a lot of people have difficulty with even now. I remember trying to use that as a defense of my own work in graduate school, and many of my MFA colleagues didn't like that. But I think that, realistically, a lot of times working abstractly, at least for myself, I don't have a preconceived notion of what the idea is about. It's where I'm at in terms of my mood, my mental state, what's going on in my life, and it just manifests in the work. So Angelo was definitely a big influence on me. His son, John Ipplolito, actually was also an influence on me, and in that he was a curator at the Guggenheim. I believe he's now at the University of Maine. He works in digital media, within the art field, and he curated a show called Mediascape that I saw in the mid to late 1990s. It was at the Guggenheim in Soho. They had a small satellite gallery in Soho, and it had Nam June Paik. It had all these, now very well known people working in new media, and it just made a huge impact on me. So it's very interesting to think that both father and son, at least for me, had a very large influence. So I just wanted to mention Angelo, and he was one of the people that actually encouraged me as an artist. He said, I had two painting professors, Ipplolito and Shapiro, and Shapiro said to us, being an artist is great, but if you have the brains to be a dentist, you should go be a dentist. And Shapiro said, if you want to be an artist, I suggest that you move to New York and give it a shot. So I followed his lead, and I appreciate that. So we don't have a whole lot of time to chat, but I'm going to open it up now. If anyone has any questions for any of the other artists, or just general conversation, threading things together, the floor is open.
I had a question.
Oh, go ahead.
I loved your videos. They were beautiful. I was wondering about the music in the second video. It seemed so perfect, that waltz. What is that piece?
Remind me what I showed second. What was the second? The forest or the
florals?
So I'll have to I'll look at the video to tell you the name of it, but to reinforce once again that the co-working is influential. Cynthia Beth Rubin suggested that I use Adobe Stock for music, and I did a free trial, and I got licensed to a number of music clips or songs, and so it's one of those. And I'd have to look on the film to remember which exactly one it is, but that's how I changed from that experience. I changed from using the music that was in the editor, which is pretty deep. Actually, CapCut has a pretty deep sound and audio library. And I was also extracting and making some of my own, but then Adobe Stock really gave me a lot of choices that were very well suited to my work. And I just jumped into that. And I downloaded several previews, and then I licensed a few that I have in a library. And I found it very helpful. So I'll look up the name of the music and I'll put it in the chat once I look it up.
Thank you.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just wanted to add to that, and so it's that Adobe Stock actually has freelance composers who are like real composers trying to make a living at it. So it's not music. It's, as you can tell from the music.
Yeah, it's very deep. The library they have is very deep. And it was fun. It was fun browsing the library and finding things that felt like they were going to fit with the work that I do. So
I just wanted to add on to that, something that I think about a lot with my pieces, the Diamondscapes, and also with the advent of AI, and that is sourcing. I often talk about the Gutenberg press of imagery that we're in right now. And honestly, words really came into their own so much after the democratization of words through the printing press, when people started kind of sourcing each other in that bibliography that became part of novels and or when people would write about things. And I feel that it's just so important for us to be aware of and talk about in this group. And I did love, Susan, I thought your work was beautiful, but I was going, where's that music from? And I feel it's important to even source. All of the imagery in my Diamondscapes, I source. If I'm going to use something from a museum, I call them and say, look, I will source you, and, always get permission, because I'm painting with information. And as that goes on, I think the bouquet goes larger when we source. Even if it's to say, like, I congratulated Verneda on her beautiful, her pieces that she did for Bryn Mawr. It's amazing how much money she raised as well. But that I said, thanks to you and Midjourney. So even in my things, when I buy something, like for Pale Mail, I'll source the fact that I purchased this picture of the World Trade Center. It wasn't, or if it's things like that. I even say where I got it from, because I agree with Cynthia that, those composers and those people who are making these pictures, I want them to become part of this larger revolution in bouquet that we're talking about here in this group. I have to say, this is just this meeting today, among many, is just so much more exciting, I have to say, than some of the stuff that's in my local purview, which we have lots of talent, but I really believe in what we're talking about here. This was a really great day. Thank you, Colin.
Yeah. I always, at the end of my films, any sound I used is always listed at the end. So.
That's great.
So, Chandra, give me a way to email you, and I'll send you the information. It's really hard for me to find it when I'm on the Zoom. So if you put your email in the chat, I'll email you the information.
Thank you, Susan.
Sure, thanks.
Anyone else? Scojo, you're taking off. Very nice to see you, and a lot of the other kind of regulars I haven't seen in a while. It's awesome. I think moving to a once a month format actually works out really well. It gives people sort of a chance to gather their thoughts, materials, come back and reconvene. So, and it also makes the whole production schedule a little bit more easy. One thing that I did want to mention is that, and I didn't realize this until looking at the calendar just now, but the first Thursday of July happens to be Independence Day, July 4th. So, I mean, we'll still have a salon. I'll be here. I don't know, I'm willing to take an hour and a half away from a barbecue or whatever might be happening on that day to be here. I feel like maybe there is some sort of metaphorical value to that, in that, we are declaring our independence from the traditional art system by deciding to meet on our own and have our own thing. And with that, I also did want to announce an upcoming event that the Techspressionist community is organizing, which is our first museum exhibition, which is going to be happening in August. It's curated by Tommy Mintz, who's been involved with the Techspressionist community for some time now, as well as a couple other artists in the group. And it's going to be happening in Brooklyn. It's actually our first museum exhibition. The Southampton show was actually at an arts center that used to be the home of a very amazing museum called the Parish Art Museum, which has now moved to a different location in Watermill, New York, just a town over. But Kingsborough Art Museum is an actual accredited art museum. It'll be the first Techspressionist show at the museum and the first Techspressionist show at a museum in New York City. So it's very exciting. It's going to be opening up August 7th. I believe the reception is going to be on a Friday, August 9th. And all the information for this show is at techspressionism.com/Brooklyn. If you're interested in getting more information, I would encourage you to reach out to Tommy, as he is the lead curator. There's also a press release that he just supplied. And basically it's in Brooklyn, kind of towards the south side of Brooklyn, near Coney Island area. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that to you and to YouTube, in case anyone's watching this post facto.
I
Yeah.
wonder, Colin, if maybe on July, when we have a meeting, if we should have the theme, either independence or America or something like that. It doesn't have to be like patriotic, of course. It could be like per Stephen's great thing today. I don't know how people can stay blind to what's going on. I really appreciated it. So I don't know. I just thought it's just an idea to throw out there as a topic.
Well, you know our tradition, Roz. You come up with the topic, you are inherently volunteering to moderate the salon. So what do you think?
Okay.
All right.
I'll
Well,
do
we
it.
don't
My
even
work
have
is
to.
all
We
about
don't even have to
America.
wait till the after party then.
Yeah,
That's
we'll do it.
awesome. All
Bring
right.
the
So,
hot dog.
well, actually, no, we have to follow the guidelines, which is, like I like to say, that one of the very few things that I learned that was of practical use by being in a fraternity, which is Robert's rules. And would anyone like to make a motion that we have the next salon topic be independence? Anyone? Okay, Nina. Nina makes a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any
I
opposed? All right, motion carries. We have a salon topic, independence, for July 4th to be moderated by Roz Dimon. So there we go. As for the last number of salons, I don't know how many, the promotional graphic will be created by Midjourney in collaboration with myself. So that's how I use AI, is creating the little album cover art for these salons.
They're great.
But-
They're wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, I like to incorporate my design background a little bit, what we do here. So we still have a little bit of time. Anyone have anything they'd like to share?
Hey, Colin.
Yep.
I just wanted to say that I just participated in the last cohort of the Loop Art Critique and Residency, and it was super fun and so interesting, and just really enjoyed every moment of it. 6 weeks getting together in the metaverse, in the Loop metaverse, and sharing art and critiquing each other's work. And our final exhibition is this Saturday at noon Eastern time, and it's hosted on the Loop metaverse, which is the same technology as Mozilla Hubs, and which we all know from Siberiana. So I especially wanted you guys to know about this, because you're all familiar with jumping into that particular style metaverse and moving around. So that's this Saturday for this current exhibition, and there's ongoing cohorts happening every 6 weeks or so. So
Awesome. Lucy, would you mind posting a link to the chat so people will know how to get there? And will it be on the main Loop? Is it loop.io? On the main Loop website as well? Like, will people be able to find their way there? So if people on YouTube who can't see the chat, Google Loop Art Critique, you should be able to get the information there. And I'm glad you brought that up, because the artist actually that created the main image for the Brooklyn exhibition, Verneda Yanushevska, who also happens to be the Instagram curator for the Techspressionist community. She was recently interviewed on Loop, and I believe she was involved in this last set of artists involved to some degree. Was that the case, Lucy? I'm not 100% sure, but
Yeah, she was a juror for the, I think it was the previous residency.
okay, gotcha. Yeah, she had a very interesting interview that's, I think, accessible through her Instagram account. She has a link there. And the whole interview process happened within the Loop corner of the metaverse. I don't know exactly how people talk about different areas of the metaverse, but the Loop zone. So awesome. Very cool. Does anyone else have
Yeah.
anything? Cynthia.
I have a quick announcement, which is SIGGRAPH Asia is going to be in Tokyo in early December, and the submission deadlines are June 20th. So I'm going to put the put this here. I realize not everybody can hop over to Tokyo so easily, but on the other hand, I'm hearing from all these people, oh, I really want to go to Japan. So if you really want to go to Japan and make it a work trip, and last time we were in Tokyo, the city of Tokyo, I don't know if they still do this, had some really nice tourist, a day trip on a bus up a mountain with great food up there and stuff. So anyway, I just put that in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Cynthia. And I just did get a question regarding the show in Brooklyn. The curator is Tommy Mintz, Mintz. So if you look him up, you should be able to find all the relevant ways to get in touch with him. I'm not sure if he's still accepting submissions at this time, but he certainly, has a website and social media, so you could always drop him a line and see if he's still accepting submissions. And he is actually a tenured professor at Kingsborough of digital art and photography. So, and he creates some very interesting algorithmic art involving photography and I believe Python code that he wrote. So. All right, well, we are coming into the home stretch here. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share? Cynthia, I'd be interested. You had some interactions with Roman, right?
Oh yeah, I was chair of the Lifetime Achievement in Digital Art Committee, SIGGRAPH, and we gave him the award. And I have one of his pieces. Not sure where it is now. I got to find it. Yes, and we corresponded just 2 weeks ago. I mean, we corresponded regularly through Facebook Messenger, and just 2 weeks ago we were in touch, or 3 weeks ago.
Did you have any thoughts or things you would want to share about him, since this sort of is commemorating his, his passing in life?
Well, one of the things I wanted to say about Roman that I actually have been thinking about everyone when we were talking about influences is that Roman was very much influenced by philosophy. And when we were talking about, I'm not ready to volunteer to chair a session just yet, but one of the things that I was thinking of would be, it would be great to have a session where people deliberately talked about their non-visual influences. Because for Roman, the non-visual influences were really important in his work. And the fact that he had been very involved in the church. Roman, are we still being recorded? Yeah, well, it's public knowledge anyway. He managed to break 2 rules at once. His wife Alice was also his therapist, and he, it became a very important relationship in his life. I mean, obviously, eventually got married, and she was very involved in ideas of psychotherapy that came into his work. Very deep thinker. Okay,
All
so
right, well, Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think it's really interesting how he crossed over, and Patrick is kind of a connection to Roman as well, through Minneapolis, where Roman was based. And I didn't realize this. I was just looking at another email that I had received from him, that before he said Minneapolis preceded Silicon Valley. And it was my good fortune to get a job teaching art history at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design in 1968. Minneapolis was the home of Control Data, Honeywell, Sperry ran supercomputer, and UNIVAC had a research center in St. Paul. So I didn't realize that, actually. It's really interesting historically in terms of just the history of technology and computing in this country. And he did go on to say, and this is very gracious of him, that this is meant to let you know that I appreciate and respect the work of the Techspressionists and wish you well. So that's amazing, and I feel like, in some way we can kind of carry on his tradition of just doing, he was somebody, I think, that just did his own thing. And, that's something that I think is very admirable. So,
and I'd like to
yeah.
point out that Roman was actually Dean of Liberal Arts. So this idea of bringing in concepts from other fields, from philosophy and psychology, was what he did his academic life.
Mm-hmm. And and there is an art center that was established in his name, the Verostko Center for the Arts, which is located
Latrobe, Pennsylvania.
Right, Latrobe. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that art center has a fairly large collection of his work, and also I believe other artists who relate to what he did. He had a pretty large volume of pre-digital work as well, traditional paintings, very interesting kind of work that preceded his interest in computing. So again, I'd encourage anyone here and on the web to look him up and check him out. So, all right. So I think we will wrap up the recording. And, we have this kind of tradition of an after party, which is basically just an extended bit of time after the recording stops, where people can hang out and kind of, shoot the shit, so to speak. And also, in lieu of having an advisory board, the after party is the advisory board. That is, people will want to stick it out through the end of the salon and hang out afterwards. That's generally where the ideas and planning for the community sort of happen in a collective way. So you're all welcome to stay. I'm going to have to close out my participation at some point to go pick my daughter up from elementary school. But, I think it's a good way to get to know some of the members of the group also in kind of an informal way. So, yeah, I'd like to thank you all. This is going to be posted to YouTube in some relatively reasonable amount of time. And yeah, that's about it. So I look forward to seeing you guys again on the 4th of July. And we will stop recording in 3, 2, 1, and cut.